People who divorced for reasons other than cheating. What was the last straw? My ex-husband was consistently abusive for many years in every possible way. He also struggled with substance problems, though he spread rumors behind my back claiming I was an alcoholic, when in truth, it was him. He had no respect for me and would humiliate me in public, often getting physically aggressive with me when he was drunk, which was quite often. Nothing was ever his fault or responsibility. It was always someone else's, and more often than not, that someone was me. I think the beginning of the end for me came on our wedding day. I had planned the entire event and paid for half of it myself, while his mother covered his portion. It was not a modest affair. It cost about $35,000 around 15 years ago. He was sulking because I refused to let him follow the wild tradition common among his social circle, where he would take a shot with every guest in the receiving line. With about 150 guests, even excluding older relatives and those unwilling, that was still a mountain of shots before even stepping into the reception. I canceled the receiving line altogether, which infuriated him. After the ceremony, I did not see him again until the next afternoon. As usual, he vanished with his friends and cousins to get obliterated. All the photos from that night show me smiling at the head table with my bridal party, while his side sat nearly empty except for his one female groomsman, who was my friend too. There are pictures of me dancing, me watching the belly dancer, me listening to speeches, and me enjoying dinner, but he is nowhere in sight. After the reception, I returned to the luxurious suite I had booked, and he wasn't there either. I ended up calling my friends, who came to spend the night with me. He never showed up. The real last straw came a few months later. We were preparing to move overseas, and I was also working as a research assistant with deadlines closing in. I was trying to pack up our apartment, finalize travel plans, and complete my writing assignments when he decided to go backcountry camping for 5 days with his foolish friends in the week before we left. He did zero packing, zero organizing, zero helping, absolutely nothing. Once again, the entire burden fell on me. And on top of that, I had my academic work to manage. His selfishness and constant prioritizing of his friends over me were recurring issues, and I believe that was the final push that made me see things clearly. I had a breakdown. I sat in our half-packed apartment, surrounded by chaos, realizing how alone I truly was. I focused on finishing the packing myself while he got drunk and high in the woods. In that silence, I began to understand that I was already living without him, that I was handling everything on my own while he dragged me down. We lived overseas for nearly a year, but during that time I quietly began planning my escape. Meanwhile, he grew even more miserable, falling deeper into his addictions, drugs, alcohol, and gambling, all of which he blamed on me. He told everyone that I was an alcoholic, that I was wasting money, that I was cheating, none of which was true. I had no time for any of that. I was working, attending therapy, and carefully arranging a safe plan to leave. He was dangerous, so I had to choose my timing wisely. When the day finally came, the relief I felt was indescribable. As expected, he caused as much chaos as possible, dragging in security guards, my family, his family, social media, and anyone who would listen. Some believed his nonsense. That was fine. Most people, including members of his own family, saw right through it. Only his mother continued to enable him. We are both remarried now, more than 10 years later, and he has children. Yet, he still clings to his anger. He portrays himself as the innocent victim while painting me as the evil, cheating alcoholic he can never forgive. He even refuses to hear my name, calling me Voldemort. Honestly, if I were his wife, I'd be quite upset that his ex from over 15 years ago still haunts his mind that much. It took me a long time to accept how deep the abuse truly went. Even now, I sometimes get sudden flashbacks of things I had buried. One came recently when someone mentioned waterboarding. I was instantly reminded of when he did that to me. I had blocked it out completely. I'm oddly grateful he went camping that week, because without that time alone, I might never have had the breakdown that opened my eyes. Who knows what might have happened if I had stayed? Maybe he would have ended me by now. I'll never know, but I'm thankful every day that I finally found the strength to walk away. Story 2. It was a lot of things that piled up over time. Honestly, we never should have gotten married in the first place. My mother had just passed away, and I was frustrated with living with my brother. We got married and moved into an apartment along with her daughter. At first, it was okay. Life felt manageable, and I thought perhaps things would get better with time. But then we bought our house, and reality quickly set in. See, when we had our apartment, we also had a storage space where all of our miscellaneous belongings went. When we moved into the house, everything came out of storage, and it became glaringly obvious very quickly that both my wife and her daughter were hoarders. Their accumulation of items was relentless and completely overwhelming. We were in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, but only 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom were actually usable. The other rooms were filled with their stuff. I'm not talking about used food containers or dead animals, but miscellaneous belongings they had accumulated over the years and refused to get rid of. Every class project, every memento, every knickknack, every stuffed animal, every piece of clothing that didn't fit, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom were packed to the brim with this chaos. I'm not perfect when it comes to collecting, but until very recently, I had my own fairly extensive collection that I maintained carefully. I cultivated it properly and stored it well, rather than filling entire rooms haphazardly. The contrast between our habits made the situation even more unbearable. Remember when I said only 1 bedroom worked? Well, for about 6 years, I slept on a couch while my soon-to-be ex and her daughter shared a bed. It was honestly disturbing. They often wore matching pajamas, stayed up watching old shows like Scooby-Doo, and even ate meals in bed together. The whole thing carried a strange, almost inappropriate sleepover vibe. To make matters even stranger, her daughter was already in her 30s. It was genuinely creepy. Many times, I asked my soon-to-be ex to clean out the rooms to make them usable, but every request led to arguments. She would always recite her favorite line, "I didn't know you were serious about that." Her refusal to take action or compromise made it impossible to live comfortably in the house. I thought I might be stuck in that situation indefinitely, but circumstances eventually allowed me to move on sooner than expected. I filed for divorce, and it looks like I will be keeping the house. I am looking forward to seeing it without so much clutter and finally reclaiming a sense of order and peace. Here's the kicker. During the divorce process, our lawyers required us to disclose all financial details. It turned out that she had been hiding serious financial issues from me. I knew she had some debt, but I never imagined it was over $100,000. I am grateful to have discovered it before any creditors could put a lien on my property. With any luck, I will be divorced by the end of the month, and they will be out a couple of weeks after that. They have already started packing, which is a small but satisfying step toward freedom. There were many other issues, including serious boundary problems and her persistent lack of follow-through on anything. Overall, the relationship should never have happened, and it became painfully clear that this marriage was not sustainable. Story 3. I'm not divorced yet, but it feels inevitable, and we're most likely headed that way. Married for 15 years with several kids. Up until 3 years ago, I worked full-time and was the sole breadwinner for our family, providing us with a very comfortable lifestyle. During that period, he stayed at home, while I was working 50 to 60 plus hours per week in a demanding healthcare setting. Even while pregnant with both sets of our twins, he neglected our 2 dogs to the point that one passed away at barely 2 years old. He wouldn't even let me see the conditions he subjected our pups to when I was away, and they were absolutely abhorrent. He let my 2 cockatiels die, and then lied about them for weeks. While their dried carcasses sat at the bottom of the cage in the bathroom he would reluctantly let me into. My cat also mysteriously passed away while I was at work, and no explanation was ever given. Mind you, at this point, I was doing 90% of the housekeeping, 50% of the cooking, and a huge portion of the childcare, including several years of breastfeeding. That should have been the last straw, yet somehow I kept going. He also committed fraud by falsifying my signature on a mortgage modification that I had absolutely no knowledge of. He kept account information secret from me because he claimed he managed the finances since he stayed at home. Long story short, he ruined my credit and almost caused us to lose our house. Despite this, I stayed and forgave blindly, thinking things might improve. Then, 3 years ago, I almost passed in a traumatic accident. Everyone labeled him a hero for taking care of me and the kids, even though he visited me a maximum of 1 to 2 times a week while I was hospitalized. I returned home to an almost unlivable house, thanks to the lack of upkeep. It hasn't improved since then, and my mobility issues and pain have prevented me from managing household duties as I once did, and I haven't been cleared to return to work yet. Has he picked up the slack? Absolutely not. Times 1,000. Somehow, I still managed to push these things under the rug for months. 2 months ago, I discovered that he had lied about very important matters dating back to before we were married for at least 16 years. This information utterly shattered me. I think that is or was the last straw. I don't know if having morals and standards was simply too much for him. I definitely married someone who does not value morality and ethics the way I do. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. I came from a much higher socioeconomic class, but I know that has no bearing when it comes to moral fortitude and internal drive. So I ignored my family when they tried to warn me against marrying him. Now I realize I probably should have listened. Now, I don't know how to live with him or without him. It feels like the kids and I will be screwed either way. Has anyone else gone through anything similar? Story 4. Firstly, I had just given birth to our second child, and while I was recovering from a really bad tear and taking care of the newborn, he got my daughter kicked out of preschool for not paying. Without telling me, he signed her up for another preschool. The entire reason we had moved to that area was for the first preschool, so this blindsided me completely. Then, within a week, he apparently got her kicked out of the second preschool as well. He claimed she didn't have the right vaccinations, but she was completely up to date and would not have been admitted without them anyway, so it was an obvious lie. He probably didn't pay for that tuition either. I could not comprehend why he did not see how infuriating it was that he failed to tell me my daughter was no longer where I thought she was. He could have ended up seriously hurt or worse, and I wouldn't have even known her location. I was still freaking upset about it, and he hit me with his typical line, "I didn't think of it like that," as if it were some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card he could use for anything. Then, he let a storage shed containing all of my possessions get taken away for non-payment. He specifically told my parents they could store some of their belongings there, and he didn't pay for it. He had previously lost my things during another move, so he knew exactly how devastating this would be for me. A few months before that, he had asked my dad to co-sign a car, which no one thought to mention to me, and then he stopped paying for it. Recently, I realized after reading on Reddit that you can euthanize a pet simply because you want to. He put my cat down for sympathy and to receive money from his mom. He claimed he was taking her for a checkup and that her cancer, never mentioned before, was so severe she had to be euthanized. I had found this strange, but I was overwhelmed with postpartum recovery, so I couldn't process it fully at the time. He also bought a puppy without asking or discussing it with me, and he did not take care of it. I could not bend down to manage its care, and having never owned a dog before, I had no idea how to care for her properly. On one of the last days I was there, he came up behind me and kissed my neck. I told him not to touch me because he repulsed me due to the type of person he is, and he went around telling everyone I called him repulsive, like the big tattletale baby he is. All of these incidents came to light at roughly the same time. I lost 90 pounds over the next few months from all the stress as I tried to clean up the mess he left behind. And no, I have no idea what he spent the money on that should have been used to pay bills. Story 5. We had meticulously planned for months a special family Christmas. Family members were coming together from 3 different states to celebrate not only the holiday, but also our child's birthday. This was at the tail end of COVID, and our child had been born just before the pandemic struck. Most of the family had not yet seen the newest member due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. Coordinating travel logistics, paperwork, and ensuring nobody got flagged as a close contact of some random stranger just before meeting was no small feat, but I managed it all. I drove 12 hours to reach our destination. We arrived, crashed for the night, and woke up the next morning only for her to demand that we cut Christmas short so I could drive another 4 hours up the coast for her to see her friends. That would have meant everyone missing Christmas together, our child's birthday, and my niece's birthday. When I firmly said no, explaining we were sticking to our plans, she sulked in the bedroom for the rest of the time, refusing to interact with anyone, despite my family's best efforts to accommodate her. Eventually, we headed north to see her friends, and the entire trip became her way or the highway. We went where she said, when she said. I was expected to get up despite a lack of sleep because I had arranged bedding for myself, but not her. Too bad, she insisted I drive her and her friends wherever they wanted. She ignored our child's dietary restrictions, ordering super spicy seafood that our child could not tolerate. Multiple days felt like main character syndrome. With verbal abuse, whenever I dared express an opinion, it was her world, and I was expected to feel lucky simply to exist in it. I had never witnessed such an extreme level of selfishness in my life. After 3 years of attempting to make the relationship work, with her resisting every single effort while blaming me for all the world's woes, it became the final straw. The very first thing I did when we returned home was hire a lawyer and begin divorce preparations. I now parallel parent and avoid contact with her as much as possible, but from what I've observed, she has ended up with the life she deserves. Over the long term, karma has a way of evening things out. Story 6. Together, we earned a little over $250,000 a year. Our house payment was $1,600, and we had one car payment of $900. On paper, we should have been living comfortably. She handled the finances because she claimed to have worked in the mortgage industry and considered herself a financial genius. She had 2 children when we met, who eventually grew up and moved out. We were married for 17 years. The oldest had 5 children starting at 19, and the youngest earned a degree and then had 2 children. This is where the problems began. We had always been relatively liberal with money, boats, cars, motorcycles, trips, and other luxuries. But after all the grandkids arrived, she started complaining that we were spending too much money. In response, I sold all our toys and paid off credit cards. Still, the financial stress continued. She became vocal about being unable to make the house or car payments. I have been in a high-paying career for decades and have never faced such issues. Even though I am not the best with money, I had always earned enough to cover my own irresponsible decisions. So, I began secretly investigating. We had separate bank accounts and deposited half of the monthly expenses into the joint account, from which she paid our bills. We each had our own credit cards, and neither of us questioned the other's spending. Little did I know, she had racked up $50,000 in credit card debt, essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul on all our bills. I wasn't used to this, so I dug deeper. Our taxable income in 2022 was over $320,000, thanks to a generous bonus. Every penny was gone. Both children lived hours away in different cities. Reviewing the joint account, I realized she had overstated our financial needs each month and was funneling cash to both kids, especially the oldest, who could not maintain a job, was with a jerk, and, as mentioned, had multiple children. That was the last straw. She was embezzling from our relationship to support the crap, irresponsible adults she had raised. After the divorce, I kept the house and all related bills, including the new furniture we had purchased. I now have money left over every month, even though my income on paper was nearly halved. Stress is much lower, everything is paid on time, and my credit has fully recovered. The lesson learned: never blindly let someone else manage your finances. Trust, but always verify. Story 7. I walked into the house, greeted my oldest son, and then turned to say hello to my husband and our youngest. My ex gave me the cold shoulder, and when I asked what was wrong, he replied, "We just agreed that you would say hello to me when you got home." I asked him to leave, and not long after, I filed for divorce. You see, my ex had a habit of shutting me out completely. I would ask him about his day, and all I ever got was a flat good. No stories, no details, no effort, no matter how hard I tried. I wanted to hear about a silly customer, an annoying coworker, an interesting plot twist on the show he was watching, anything. But all I received was a good, and when he was upset with me, I would not even get a hello. I would ask what was wrong, and his response was always, "I'll get over it." No explanation, no conversation, just a brush off. To this day, I still have no idea what I did that bothered him. How can you fix a behavior if you do not know it is a problem? Eventually, I gave up trying to initiate any conversation, and we went 4 months without speaking a single word to each other. Can you imagine living with a partner and 2 children under the age of 2 and going 4 months without speaking at all? It was unbearable. I prepared to leave, organized my finances, arranged childcare, and made a detailed plan. Still, I held on to a tiny hope that he might wake up and try, and that my leaving would be the wake-up call he needed. I sat him down and had a heart-to-heart. I laid everything out. I could not take it anymore. We needed to engage with each other every day, share moments, stories, even something as small as a hello. I begged him to tell me when something upset him so I could understand, respond, and grow. I simply wanted a connection. I wanted him to try. We came to an agreement that every day we would say hello and talk, no matter how small the topic. The very next day, he used that promise as a weapon against me. There were many more problems in that marriage, but that moment broke me completely. I realized that I would always be on the outside, and he would never let me in. Story 8. Years of emotional and financial abuse had already worn me down, along with him being a lazy and uninvolved partner and parent. For a long time, I had hoped he might change, but deep down I knew he never would. The final straw came when I returned from a week-long work trip, right before we were supposed to host a graduation party for his brother at our house. We had been separated for about 3 months, and at first, I had said no. It was our former home, but I had been the one living there. Still, it was bigger and closer to his brother's school than his own house, and since he would be staying there with our 5-year-old son while I was gone, it made sense logistically. In truth, he loved showing off our big house to his family. None of them knew we were separated yet, and he wanted to throw a lavish party to demonstrate his financial success. I hated the facade and just wanted to be honest with his family. I also knew I would be arriving home the night before and would have no time to clean or prepare, and I was almost certain that if I didn't oversee it, he absolutely would not. After he begged me to hold the party there, I finally agreed and left him a simple, reasonable list of tasks that needed to be completed as conditions for the party. Clean the guest bathroom, tidy up during the week, and power wash the back patio he had promised to do for the last 2 years. He promised to take care of everything. He took the entire week off from work, even though our son was at kindergarten, until 3 in the afternoon. I called him during the week to check on our little one, and casually asked how the preparations were coming along. Each time, he told elaborate stories about the progress he had made. I felt genuinely relieved and happy, thinking I would return home to a ready house and only need to show up for the party. But when I walked in the door on Friday night, I was shocked. The house was in complete chaos. Far worse than when I had left it. None of the tasks he had promised were done. To make matters worse, all his trash and dirty dishes from the week had been dumped into my newly redone home office, the space I had been most proud of. It looked like a disaster zone. I stood there sobbing, realizing I would have to spend the evening cleaning for a party I never even wanted, and that's exactly what I did. That was when the gaslighting began. He denied everything, claiming he never promised to do any of those chores, and began yelling that he wasn't doing my chores. This was his signature move, flipping reality to make himself the victim. The very list I had given him was still on the table while he insisted it never existed, and that he had never promised a thing, even after lying to me all week about completing tasks. I spent the evening scrubbing, tidying, and crying, preparing for a party I never wanted, while he acted like the injured party. That night, I finally reached my limit. I told him that I wanted a divorce. Later, during the divorce process, I learned that he had also been unfaithful and had taken out credit cards in my name, racking up thousands of dollars of debt I had not known about. But honestly, that revelation did not even make my top 10 reasons for divorcing him. I had already made up my mind long before that. The cheating was simply another part of the chaos I had chosen to leave behind. Story 9. Although the cheating was the last straw, I had been wanting to leave for many years. The cheating simply gave me the out I needed, and I am in the process now. Surprisingly, the cheating did not hurt much because I was already so done with the situation. What really hurts is the end of the marriage itself, because despite everything I am about to write, he is truly one of a kind. He is just not what I had hoped he would become. At 48, I am finally learning the lesson of when someone shows you who they are, believe them. The biggest challenge in my marriage has always been the non-stop mess. He has never put anything away without me asking. He does not do dishes, does not put clothes away, does not do laundry, and never gets the car washed. No mopping or vacuuming. I can honestly count on one hand how many times in 14 years I have seen him do either. It is 4. Garbage never goes in the garbage unless I put it there, and if something, food or otherwise, falls on the floor, that is where it stays. If I ask him to do something, the answer is always later, and guess what? It never gets done. We both work extremely high-stress jobs in the same industry, and we end each day equally exhausted. He has depression and bipolar disorder, and sleeps most of the weekend. Meanwhile, I am cleaning and doing laundry all weekend. When I bring up the mess, he says I am upset because he sleeps so much. I want him to rest. I know he needs it. I just want him to pick up after himself during the week so I do not have to spend the entire weekend cleaning and can enjoy my free time. Despite always agreeing and promising to improve every single time, it has never actually happened. Before we met, my home was my sanctuary. A beautiful, clean, tidy space where guests could drop by any time. My brain functions so much better in that kind of environment. I have not had that in 14 years. I work on commission and am convinced I could make more money if my home were serene, because my mind does not work well in a mess. I discovered his cheating in January. I said I wanted to reconcile, and I made one of my non-negotiables in our relationship past D-Day to keep a clean home. He promised to follow through, but he has not even remotely kept that promise. So I asked him to move out, and he did. I have spent the last 2 weeks trying to get my place in order. I cannot believe how dirty and messy it is. It is only a 2-room apartment, and yet years of mess have made it overwhelmingly difficult. I guess I had given up over time because it felt so futile. As an insult to injury, I had a cancer scare last month. All I could think about was that if I had cancer and needed treatment, there would still be no one to clean up, and I would be stuck doing it until I was too sick. If I died, I would die in a mess. I am cancer-free for now, though waiting on a few other tests, and at 48 years old, this is not how I want to live anymore. I love him. He is funny, charming, and smarter than anyone I have ever met, and he loves me. But sometimes, love and charm are simply not enough. And before anyone asks, hiring a cleaner is not an option. He believes that if a cleaner comes, it completely absolves him of maintaining the space. Dishes and clothes can wait until the cleaner comes twice a month. That approach will not work. Separation and probably divorce is the only solution at this point. Story 10. The last straw came when I finally opened the lunchbox he took with him every day to look for a job. I had known for a couple of years that things were not right. He could not hold a job. He did not help around the house or do any yard work. He would play with our baby, but he did none of her actual care. There were always incredible stories about how he lost or found something, the kind of stories that seemed impossible to make up. His behavior varied from non-stop talking about nonsense to passing out midday on the couch. Still, he was never mean. He never hit me or even called me a name. It was clear he loved our baby. There was never any money missing from our joint account. How could I break up our family just because I was unhappy? I had no evidence of anything and began to feel crazy, like I was looking for something that did not exist. Until that morning, when I went to pay the mortgage and realized the money was gone. This was in 2009. At that time, in our little area of the world, addiction was ramping up, but most people did not know what to look for. 2 weeks before that morning, I had caught, of all things, an episode of Dr. Phil in which he described the symptoms. I confronted my husband that evening. He got very defensive. No, if I had a problem, I would tell you. That morning, my gut told me to take a break from feeding my daughter breakfast and check the lunchbox. I found several prescription bottles for powerful painkillers and sedatives that weren't his. Still guided by intuition, I grabbed my digital camera and took photos. I was putting the camera away in the closet when he came down the hall, picked up the lunchbox, and proclaimed he was going out to look for a job. Everything about our life together for the past 2 years suddenly fell into place and made sense. The only part I was confused about was what to do next. I called 3 family members and all said the same thing: go to the police. He was watching our daughter while I went to school at night, and I knew he would be taking her out of the house, and the lunchbox too. What if, one family member suggested, he gets pulled and searched? Your baby could be taken into state custody, and you would have to prove your innocence to get her back. I went to the police that morning, armed with my digital camera, hoping they would help me and fully expecting to be treated like crap. The police did help, surprisingly so. Oddly helpful, in fact. I wanted my husband out of our house, and they helped me get exactly that with a restraining order. He was not mean or violent, but he was a gun enthusiast who had threatened to harm himself on multiple occasions when things did not go his way. Apparently, that was all the proof needed. Our baby is now 17. Her father has not overcome his addiction. The last time she saw him, a couple of years ago, he did not resemble his former self in looks or actions. As far as we know, he is homeless, and we have no means to contact him. She still cries for him, searches for him in the county inmate list, and hopes he will get help. I still do everything I can to try to fill the void he left in her life, and yet, it all came down to a lunchbox. Story 11. In 2010, I met a girl and everything happened incredibly fast. We fell in love almost immediately, she moved in quickly, and we got engaged within months. Between the engagement and the wedding, during which we had known each other for just 13 months, life threw every challenge imaginable at us. I quit a job due to severe depression, my car was repossessed, her car's engine became unaffordably unrepairable, we got evicted, and we had to move in with a horrible roommate in a temporary house that was being sold, basically just paying utilities to watch the place. We got married, and within weeks, we had to move again because the house was sold. We ended up living with the elderly mother of a mutual friend. Unfortunately, she was bipolar, and she took us in during a manic phase. Her depressive phase soon followed, and she silently resented us, refusing to communicate her feelings. She simply decided not to turn on the air conditioning, which meant the house never got below 80 degrees, even at night. Not the best conditions for trying to find a job, especially when I had been in and out of minimum wage retail hell jobs for months, while my wife worked a part-time deli position at a grocery store. One night, a huge fight erupted with our temporary landlord, and she told us to get out. We were now legitimately homeless, facing the grim prospect of living out of a car we were borrowing from a friend. With no family nearby and barely enough income to survive, two friends took us into their already tiny home. Their twins shared a bedroom, and we slept in the living room on a futon mattress in their storage room. Just a week after that, the wife of our friends broke her leg, so we extended our stay to help care for her. A couple of weeks later, my wife fell and broke her elbow, leaving her without a job since we had no insurance. It took about a month, but I found a new part-time job. She recovered enough to return to her position, and we moved into a crappy extended stay motel. A few weeks later, bedbugs forced us to move to a slightly better, but still extended stay hotel. Over the next year, we discovered just how poor you can be while still having a roof and a bed. Food stamps only went so far, and our church pantry helped, but we lived in a tiny 200-square-foot space and grew to resent each other. We had not had intimate relations for the last 9 months of our time together. My job improved, more hours, a couple of raises, and a promotion, while she repeatedly quit jobs, being unreliable and inconsiderate. The last straw was an incident I have shared before. We bought 2 pizzas from Aldi, one supreme and one pepperoni. I had a hard day at work and was desperately looking forward to eating the pizza, as I had mostly been living off ramen and Chef Boyardee. When I got home to the hotel, she had eaten my pizza, not because there was no other food available, but simply because she wanted it. A few weeks later, I realized that we did not work as a couple, and that we needed to go our separate ways. We got divorced shortly thereafter. The core reason was that she was extraordinarily inconsiderate. It was never me, it was never us, it was always her. Story 12. My younger brother's life seemed to tumble into chaos the moment he tried to navigate love on his own. He hadn't dated much in school, and our home life was riddled with emotional turbulence due to our emotionally abusive mother. As a result, he struggled to relate to women and sustain relationships once he moved out on his own. Depression shadowed him for years. Fast forward a few years, and he met a woman online from across the country. They began chatting and playing games for a few weeks, and he bought her a plane ticket to come visit and see where things might lead. They connected instantly, and she chose not to return home, instead deciding to stay with him permanently. This should have been a glaring warning sign, but he was smitten and enthralled by the attention, so they moved in together into his tiny apartment. Within a few weeks, they married via justice of the peace, and that's when I finally met her. Something about her unsettled both my wife and me, though we couldn't pinpoint exactly what. 6 months into the marriage, she started complaining of mysterious ailments that no doctor could explain, and all concluded they were psychosomatic or hypochondriac tendencies. Without discussion or notice, she quit her part-time job and insisted he care for her while she recovered. He tried to be a supportive husband and agreed. Within a year, she had burned through approximately $30,000 of his life savings and accumulated at least another $20,000 in debt due to an internet gambling addiction. She had limitless energy for fun and leisure activities, but stubbornly refused to work. When he finally confronted her, she threatened to harm herself and claimed she would stage it to make him look responsible for it. Given his history of depression and intermittent medication use, he feared she could succeed. He was effectively trapped. Finally, something in his mind snapped. He walked into a Walmart, purchased a BB gun pistol, without BBs, then calmly entered a nearby bank. He informed a teller politely that he was robbing the bank and asked them to call the police. He displayed the BB pistol without pointing it at anyone and sat near the door. Once the police arrived, he walked outside, dropped the pistol, and surrendered himself into custody. He called his wife to the scene and told her she could take everything, since he was going to jail. She took everything she could and moved back across the country. During the trial, a background check on his now ex-wife revealed she had executed similar schemes on multiple men across the country and had a warrant out for her arrest out west. When the judge asked if he would prefer to go home to his wife, and seek treatment or remain in jail, he chose incarceration. His choice made him briefly famous on the internet. One of the police officers commented that after meeting his wife at the scene, they likely would have chosen jail too. After several months, he was diagnosed, began medication, recovered, and was released. In the end, there was a happy resolution. Years later, he reconnected with a woman he had known in school, and they began dating. My wife and I met her and were immediately impressed by her kindness and warmth. They married in a simple ceremony at a park with friends and family and now live happily together. I am over the moon happy for him. Story 13. He left me a note saying he was going to end it all and disappeared for 9 hours. I know that makes me sound like a total wuss, but it's a lot more complicated than it seems. We got together when I was 18 and he was 21. I waited on him hand and foot for almost 10 years, and in return, he stayed with me while I paid his bills. How gracious and loving, right? He had a video game addiction that he refused to address for the last 2 years of our relationship. He wouldn't take his medications for his depression, he wouldn't go to therapy, and if I or his parents didn't make his doctor appointments, he would never get anything addressed, mentally or physically. He began calling out constantly from work and eventually stopped going altogether, choosing to no call, no show instead. We worked at the same company, and I made him carpool so I could at least guarantee he would show up to work. But often, he wouldn't even stay. During all of this, I was in tears begging him to show any kind of affection or love for me. There is one very distinct moment I remember, after I had started therapy and was realizing how much of my childhood was more messed up than I thought. I had a fight with my abuser over the phone, and after I hung up, I went into the other room where he was playing video games, the very thing he chose over work or social interactions, and I said outright, "I really need you right now. Can you please give me some undivided attention? I'm really struggling." He glanced over his shoulder, gave a hesitant, non-committal sound, and turned back around. I begged through sobs. "Then at least when you get to a stopping point in your game?" He grunted and nodded, and I went back to our bedroom. I didn't see him until the next morning, when he told me again that he wouldn't be going to work. A few months later, I told him that I was seriously thinking of leaving since I wasn't happy in our relationship and had been reflecting on my feelings, wondering if I might actually be a lesbian rather than the way I had always assumed about myself. It turned out that I had just grown so frustrated and resentful toward him that I couldn't picture myself being with another man, even if it wasn't him specifically. I asked him to step up and treat me and our relationship as if it genuinely mattered to him. I needed him to make a real effort to show that he valued me for more than just being his surrogate caregiver and support system. That conversation happened on a Friday night, and I laid everything out clearly, hoping he would understand the seriousness of my feelings and the changes I needed to see. On the following Monday, we carpooled to work as usual. He came straight from his job site to join me for lunch during our break at my work site, since we both worked for the same company and our breaks always lined up perfectly. Sitting down to eat lunch together when he actually showed up to work had become one of the few consistent routines we had, a small yet meaningful part of our week that I cherished despite everything else going wrong. That shared lunchtime, brief as it was, highlighted both the connection we still had and the tension that had quietly built beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Story 14. It wasn't a divorce, but at the beginning of this year, I ended an 8-plus-year relationship and engagement. We spent our early 20s living well below our means. I was diligently working on my credit and savings, while she apparently ignored all her debts, leaving her credit score permanently damaged. The worst part is that it wasn't even a deal breaker for me. I eventually saved a decent amount of money and raised my credit score close to 800. So I asked, since we were serious about our future, if she would help out with a mortgage that I would have to get solely in my name due to her poor credit, though she would eventually have a claim to it after marriage. I earned about $50,000 a year, and she earned about $40,000. I was willing to cover most of the mortgage and all the bills, but if we were going to save for a wedding and honeymoon, she would need to contribute a few $100s a month. Not long after I bought the house, she began constantly complaining about working a full-time job. She wanted to try selling her art. I suggested she take a part-time job since her financial contribution was small each month. This would allow her time to focus on her art and see if it could be a viable source of income, or at least build her reputation before committing fully. She was ecstatic and quit her full-time office job. After that, she never attempted a part-time job or contributed financially to the household again. This went on for a full year. On top of the financial strain, I asked her to at least contribute a little more to cleaning, as we normally clean together on Saturday mornings. I didn't want to be the only one working, paying bills, and still handling household chores on my day off. I would come home to a freaking messy hoarder-level house, and she would be sitting in the middle of it, drawing on her iPad. I gave her months to work through whatever she was going through, trying to be patient. Eventually, suggestions turned into arguments. Arguments turned into fights, and fights escalated into non-stop screaming matches. I was frustrated and drained, but I didn't want to end the relationship because she had been my best friend and partner for over 7 years. I also worried she would be homeless and tens of thousands of dollars in debt with horrible credit if I kicked her out. It eventually came to a head. I laid down an ultimatum: stop prioritizing your art over our relationship and future, or it's over. She hesitated. In that moment, I knew she didn't understand and that we didn't have a future together. Story 15. We were long distance throughout our entire relationship. I told him that if we were serious about making this work, I needed to know he was fully committed to me, since it would require me to leave my dream job that I had just relocated across the US for, and figure out what to do with the condo I had just bought. We eloped after 2 years of dating, and it took me another year to find a remote job and get everything organized to be ready to move across the country. When the time came for the move, he didn't help me with any of it. He claimed to be surprised that I would need assistance with moving. Okay, I thought, maybe it was a miscommunication on my part, so I wrote out an explicit list of everything that still needed to be done. Still, he didn't lift a finger. I drove all of my belongings by myself 1,000 miles to move into his house. He didn't help with unloading or unpacking. Things had been rough even before I moved because of the long distance, but he had kept reassuring me that everything would improve once we lived together. I had only been living in his house for about a month when he told me I was a parasite for moving in. I was obviously offended, but he said I was overreacting and insisted it was a joke. There were other issues as well, like having to remind him every night to brush his teeth before bed. I even had to ask him the last time he had showered, because sometimes he would stink, and I knew it had been at least 36 hours since his last shower. I have no idea what changed, but it felt as if he became a completely different person once I moved in. During our long-distance relationship, we saw each other at least once a month, and during the holidays, I stayed with him for weeks at a time. We had numerous discussions before we eloped to ensure we were aligned in our plans for the future. Before we even started dating, I told him I wanted at least 2 children, maybe 4, and he said he wanted the same. Now, he was unsure about having children. He had also reversed on other topics we had agreed upon. I didn't know who this person was anymore. I had moved in with a stranger. It was exactly the scenario I had tried to avoid, making major life decisions without a safety net. But I realized I could not live with this person. There were many things outside of my control, but one thing I could control was who the future father of my children would be. So, I left. Story 16. I sat down with my stepson, who is 17, to create a chart for where we should take our family vacation. We spent several hours researching and comparing different locations, making a pros and cons chart with costs and details included. I brought it up to the family, hoping it would help guide the decision. What you need to know is that her 2 adult children had moved back in with us, after discovering that the real world was tougher than they expected. Nobody else in the house was working besides me. My ex and I had been in multiple arguments over money before this, so tension was already high. During that dinner, nobody seemed to care what I wanted or what was most important to me. Frustrated, I got up and went downstairs to my man cave. They continued arguing over which vacation would be best, completely unaware that I had left. About 45 minutes later, my ex came downstairs and asked, "Why did you leave?" I simply responded that I wasn't needed. The next morning, I noticed my stepdaughter and ex getting ready, flaunting their new LV bags. They were literally preparing to just go have coffee at a local cafe, no big deal. Not something unusual, but I happened to notice their matching bags. As I went to get dressed for work, I pulled out a pair of underwear and discovered there were holes in them. I snapped. I completely lost it. I counted the months that had passed since anyone else had contributed to the household. I had also been doing all the yard work, among other things. So, I cut her off from the credit cards. She responded by emptying the joint account, which was strictly meant for paying contractors. This led me to dig deeper into the finances. I discovered she had been giving the credit card to her adult son for gas when he wasn't living with us. There were 2 to 3 charges on the same day alone. I hadn't explicitly forbidden her from filling up the kids' gas tanks, but especially with the oldest son, who had left the home because I told him he needed a job due to being ungrateful. She knew I would not be happy and hid it from me, lying about it. Looking further into the finances, I discovered she had pilfered a solid $10,000 from the joint account and was spending a good $2,000 to $3,000 per month on the credit card. It was at that moment that I realized I had been nothing more than a bank, a very bad one, just handing out money without any accountability. It was the last straw. I had asked her numerous times to slow down her spending. We had just bought a new house and were in the middle of a remodel. Our most recent fight had been over her spending around $5,000 on Christmas, which I thought was ridiculous, especially considering we really couldn't afford it. Story 17. My friend, a 28-year-old man, discovered last year that he was sterile after about a year of trying to conceive with his wife. They had been high school sweethearts, the only person either of them had ever been with. The moment he found out he was sterile, she went cold on him. She packed her belongings and stayed at her mom's house, leaving him hanging for a weekend before returning with divorce papers. She plainly said she just couldn't live with the fact that they wouldn't be able to have children of their own and completely dismissed his suggestions for adoption and other options. She even paid to have the divorce case expedited. I was supposed to pick him up from the courthouse afterward. At first, I couldn't find him, and after searching, I discovered him in tears at the far end of the parking lot. While sitting on the front bench waiting for me, she came up and tried to smooth things over, telling him that everything would be all right and that he would move on. He simply looked at her and said, "I don't want to know you anymore," and completely fell apart. His only love, best friend, and soulmate since age 14, all that went straight into the garbage. I even teared up after dropping him off at home because I could feel the depth of his pain. He later confided in his pastor, questioning why, if there was a God, he would have to endure such heartbreak. A few months later, he moved out of their old apartment and into a new studio on his own. It turned out that she had already tried dating someone new, and eventually, the guilt and regret crashed down on her. He reluctantly agreed to meet with her. He told her everything on his mind, the depths of betrayal and overwhelming sadness he had felt, making it clear he wouldn't wish that on his worst enemy. About a year later, up to now, she is still downward spiraling, and her family, who had been close to him all these years, is still displeased with her. She gave up trying to reconcile. I feel bad for both of them, honestly. She listened to the wrong people, made a rash decision, and went too far. Now she has lost her person and will have to live with the guilt forever. While well, how does someone in his shoes ever move forward from this type of heartbreak? How can he trust another partner again after losing his only love and soulmate in such a brutal way? Story 18. We never legally married, but after more than 20 years, I considered her my wife. Every time I lost a job, she would kick me out. I have never been able to hold a steady job for very long due to a mental disability. They say that with accommodations, it should be manageable, but I have never actually seen any accommodations in any job I worked, even when going through vocational rehab. I was always able to get another position and save up, at which point she would take me back because we have children, so I always returned. The last time she threatened me, I was working as a teacher for a special education class at a non-profit, running after-school programs. She claimed I wasn't making enough money, even though I earned more than she said was necessary. She demanded that I quit that job and find another one that brought in more income. For once, I stood up for myself and said no. She then threatened to call the police and file a report claiming she believed I was trying to have an inappropriate relationship with my daughter. Let me be clear, I never showed any indication of that. Nor did I ever have any intention. She reasoned that I regularly told my daughter she looked pretty. She had self-esteem problems, and I was simply trying to help build her confidence. Somehow, my ex convinced my daughter to go along with the story. My daughter began explaining that she didn't feel safe around me. At that moment, I realized there was no place for me in that house anymore. Nearly 10 years later, I got my ex to admit that it was all fabricated. What bothers me most is that she managed to convince my daughter of it, and that still does not sit right with me. I still talk to my children, though not much to my ex. I do not live near them, so our communication is always over the phone. My son was 5 when I had to leave and felt abandoned. He struggles with severe depression. My daughter has transitioned and is now my son. They have other challenges, but being trans is not one of them. I continue to do what I can to help build their self-esteem. It is difficult being an absentee father, but I try my best. Story 19. He was always somewhat quirky and self-centered. like the self-centeredness you often see in children, but overall, he was a generally good person. Growing up, my parents' relationship seemed very normal and even boring. They hardly ever argued, or so it seemed to a child's eyes. Behaviorally, he began to grow more difficult when he developed diabetes. I suspect he had undiagnosed ADHD, which can make controlling your eating challenging, but he also refused to take responsibility for it or for the mood swings that came with his blood sugar fluctuations. Over time, he became increasingly controlling, paranoid, and worse with hoarding. Then he underwent bariatric surgery, and his behavior issues escalated exponentially. The type of surgery he received is extremely invasive and alters how your body metabolizes food, while also affecting the microbiome, which we now know plays a significant role in mood and behavior. He never physically harmed her, but he did have physical altercations with me because I was not as submissive as she was. Starting in my teen years, he insisted I give him hugs, even begging for them when I said no. Come on, I'm your dad," he would say, using guilt as a weapon. I once asked him if he really wanted fake hugs from someone who did not want to give them, and he said yes. It was clear that this was all about control. With her, his behavior manifested differently. She endured mostly verbal abuse, a complete lack of transparency about finances, never being allowed to own anything herself, and his overall selfishness. Living with him was emotionally exhausting and oppressive. Later, I discovered that he had exhibited problematic behavior even before I was born. Apparently, he had acted inappropriately with my mom on their first date. I would not be surprised if there had been marital essay, though she has never disclosed it. One incident I know for certain occurred when my mom was 8 months pregnant with her first baby. He locked her outside in the snow in her bare feet because he was angry. It was not the safest neighborhood, yet she tolerated it. I cannot understand why this did not raise a huge red flag for her. Over the years, she continued to condone abusive behavior directed at others, both from him and from my older sister, who was also abusive. For example, when he demanded hugs, she would say, "Don't be rude, go hug your father." Most dysfunctional marriages consist of two dysfunctional people, each enabling and tolerating destructive behaviors in the other. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.